The Bible in a Year, Day 87, Judges 19 through 21. In those days there was no king in Israel. There was a Levite residing in remote parts of the mountain region of Ephraim, who had taken for himself a concubine from Bethlehem of Judah. And his concubine spurned him and left him for her father's house in Bethlehem of Judah, and she stayed for 4 months. Her husband set out with his servant and a pair of donkeys and went after her to soothe her and bring her back. He arrived at her father's house. When the young woman's father saw him, he came out joyfully to meet him. His father-in-law, the young woman's father, urged him to stay, and so he spent 3 days eating and drinking and passing the night there. On the 4th day he rose early in the morning and prepared to go, but the young woman's father said to his son-in-law, "Fortify yourself with a little food. You can go on later." So they stayed, and the 2 men ate and drank together. Then the young woman's father said to her husband, "Why not decide to spend the night here and enjoy yourself?" The man made a move to go, but when his father-in-law pressed him, he went back and spent the night there. On the 5th morning he rose early to depart, but the young woman's father said, "Fortify yourself." He coaxed him, and he tarried him until the afternoon, and the 2 of them ate. When the husband was ready to go with his concubine and servant, the woman's father said to him, "See, the day is wearing on toward evening. Stay for the night. See, the day is coming to an end. Spend the night here and enjoy yourself. Early tomorrow you can start your journey home." The man, however, refused to stay another night, and he and his concubine set out with a pair of saddle donkeys and traveled until they came opposite Jebus, which is Jerusalem. Since they were near Jebus, with the day far gone, the servant said to his master, "Come, let us turn off to this city of the Jebusites and spend the night in it." But his master said to him, "We will not turn off to a foreigner's city where there are no Israelites. We will go to Gibeah." "Come," he said to his servant, "let us make for some other place and spend the night in either Gibeah or Ramah." So they continued on their way until the sun set on them when they were opposite Gibeah of Benjamin. There they turned off to enter Gibeah for the night. The man went in and sat down in the town square, but no one took them inside to spend the night. In the evening, however, an old man came from his work in the field. He was from the mountain region of Ephraim, though he was living in Gibeah, where the local people were Benjaminites. When he noticed the traveler in the town square, the old man asked, "Where are you going, and where have you come from?" He said to him, "We are traveling from Bethlehem of Judah, far up into the mountain region of Ephraim, where I am from. I have been to Bethlehem of Judah, and now I am going home, but no one has taken me into his house. We have straw and fodder for our donkeys, and bread and wine for myself, and for your maidservant and the young woman who is with your servant. There is nothing else we need." "Rest assured," the old man said to him, "I will provide for you all your needs. Do not spend the night in the public square." So he led them to the house and mixed fodder for the donkeys. Then they washed their feet and ate and drank. While they were enjoying themselves, the men of the city, a bunch of scoundrels, surrounded the house and beat on the door. They said to the old man, who was the owner of the house, "Bring out the man who has come into your house so that we may get intimate with him." The man who was the owner of the house went out to them and said, "No, my brothers, do not be so wicked. This man has come into my house. Do not commit this terrible crime. Instead, let me bring out my virgin daughter and this man's concubine. Humiliate them or do whatever you want, but against him do not commit such a terrible crime." But the men would not listen to him. So the man seized his concubine and thrust her outside. They raped her and abused her all night until morning, and let her go as the sun was coming up. At the approach of the morning, the woman came and collapsed at the entrance of the house in which her husband was, and lay there until morning. When her husband arose in the morning and opened the door of the house to start out again on his journey, there was the woman, his concubine, collapsed at the entrance of the house, with her hands on the threshold. "Come, let us go," he said to her, but there was no answer. So the man placed her on a donkey and started out again for home. On reaching home, he got a knife and took hold of the body of his concubine. He cut her up limb by limb into 12 pieces and sent them throughout the territory of Israel. He instructed the men whom he sent, "Thus you shall say to all the men of Israel, has such a thing ever happened from the day the Israelites came up from the land of Egypt to this day? Take note of it from a plan and give orders." So all the Israelites came out as one from Dan to Beersheba, including the land of Gilead, and the assembly gathered to the Lord at Mizpah. The leaders of all Israel, all the staff bearers of Israel, presented themselves in the assembly of the people of God, 400,000 foot soldiers who carried swords. Meanwhile, the Benjaminites heard that the Israelites had gone up to Mizpah. The Israelites asked, "How did this evil thing happen?" And the Levite, the husband of the murdered woman, testified, "It was at Gibeah of Benjamin, which my concubine and I had entered for the night. The lords of Gibeah rose up against me and surrounded me in the house at night. I was the one they intended to kill, but they abused my concubine and she died. So I took my concubine and cut her up and sent her through every part of the territory of Israel, because of the terrible thing they had done in Israel. So now, all you Israelites, give your judgment and counsel in this manner." All the people rose as one to say, "None of us will leave for our tents or return to our homes. Now, as for Gibeah, this is what we will do. We will go up against it by lot, taking from all the tribes of Israel 10 men for every 100, 100 for every 1,000, 1,000 for every 10,000, and procuring supplies for the soldiers who will go to exact from Gibeah of Benjamin the full measure of the terrible thing it committed in Israel." So all the men of Israel gathered against the city, united at once. The tribes of Israel sent men throughout the tribe of Benjamin to say, "This is the evil that has occurred among you. Now give up the men, the scoundrels who are in Gibeah, that we may put them to death and thus purge the evil from Israel." But the Benjaminites refused to listen to their kindred, the Israelites. Instead, the Benjaminites assembled from their cities at Gibeah to march out to battle with the Israelites. On that day, the Benjaminites mustered for their cities 26,000 swordsmen, in addition to the inhabitants of Gibeah, who mustered 700 picked men who were left-handed, every one of them able to sling a stone at a hair without missing. The men of Israel, without Benjamin, mustered 400,000 swordsmen, all of them warriors. Then went up to Bethel and consulted God. When the Israelites asked, "Who shall go up first to do battle with the Benjaminites?" the Lord said, "Judah first." The Israelites rose in the morning and encamped against Gibeah. The men of Israel marched out to do battle with Benjamin and drew up in battle array against them at Gibeah. The Benjaminites marched out of Gibeah that day and felled 22,000 men of Israel. But the army of the men of Israel took courage and again drew up for battle in the place where they had drawn up on the previous day. Then the Israelites went up and wept before the Lord until evening. "Shall I again engage my brother Benjamin in battle?" they asked the Lord. The Lord answered, "Attack." When the Israelites drew near to the Benjaminites on the second day, Benjamin marched out of Gibeah again and felled 18,000 Israelites, all of them swordsmen. So the entire Israelite army wept up and entered Bethel. There they sat weeping before the Lord. They fasted that day until evening. They presented burnt offerings and communion offerings before the Lord. The Israelites consulted the Lord, for the ark of the covenant of the Lord was there in those days, and Phinehas, son of Eleazar, son of Aaron, and was standing in his presence in those days, and asked, "Shall I again go out to battle with my brother Benjamin, or shall I stop?" The Lord said, "Attack, for tomorrow I will deliver him into your power." So Israel sent men in ambush around Gibeah. When the Israelites went up against the Benjaminites on the third day, they drew up against Gibeah as on other occasions. When the Benjaminites marched out to meet the army, they began as on other occasions to strike down some of the troops along the highways, one of which goes up to Bethel and one to Gibeah in the open country. About 30 Israelites were slain. The Benjaminites thought, "They are routed before us as previously." The Israelites, however, were thinking, "We will flee and draw them out from the city onto the highways." And then all the men of Israel rose from their places, forming up at Baal Tamar. And the Israelites in ambush rushed from their places west of Gibeah and advanced against Gibeah with 10,000 picked men from all Israel. The fighting was severe, but no one knew that a disaster was closing in. The Lord defeated Benjamin before Israel, and on that day the Israelites killed 25,100 men of Benjamin, all of them swordsmen. Then the Benjaminites saw that they were defeated. The men of Israel gave ground to Benjamin, trusting in the ambush they had set at Gibeah. Then the men in ambush, having made a sudden dash against Gibeah, marched in and put the whole city to the sword. The agreement the men of Israel had with the men in ambush was that they would send up a smoke signal from the city, and the men of Israel would then wheel about in the battle. Benjamin, having begun by killing off some 30 of the men of Israel, thought, "Surely they are completely routed before us, as in the earlier fighting." But when the column of smoke began to rise up from the city, Benjamin looked back, and there was the whole city going up in smoke toward heaven. Then when the men of Israel wheeled about, the men of Benjamin were thrown into confusion, for they realized that disaster was closing in on them. They retreated before the men of Israel in the direction of the wilderness. But the fighting kept pace with them, and those who had been in the city were spreading destruction in between. They surrounded the men of Benjamin and pursued them from Noha and drove them along to a point east of Gibeah. 18,000 men from Benjamin fell, all of them warriors. They turned and fled into the wilderness to the crag of Ramon. The Israelites picked off 5,000 men on the highways and kept pace with them as far as Gidom, where they struck down another 2,000 of them. The total of those from Benjamin who fell that day was 25,000 swordsmen, all of them warriors. 600 men turned and fled into the wilderness to the crag of Rimmon, where they remained for 4 months. The men of Israel turned back against the Benjaminites, putting them to the sword, the inhabitants of the cities, the livestock, and all they came upon. Moreover, they destroyed by fire all the cities they came upon.